Okay, it's 2 o'clock. Will someone in the back please close the door? Welcome to Media Over QUIC, everybody. This is session 1 of 3. We get 3 times the fun this week. Welcome to Vienna, those of you who just arrived, like me, and you see the mascot of the local American football team. This is the IETF note well. It describes some of the legal implications of you being here, particularly regarding intellectual property and our code of conduct. If you're unfamiliar with these documents, I suggest that you type IETF note well into a search engine and read up on them. Here's some resources for the meeting. You're probably familiar with them all. Okay. Obviously, we're using MeetEcho for this meeting. If you are attending here in person, please scan the QR code that you see on the mic stands. We don't have it anywhere else. So to record your attendance here and so that you can participate in joining the queue and other interactions. Is there a separate slide for the mock? Yeah. Okay, all right. If you are a remote participant, we strongly suggest you use a headset because the noise cancellation properties of MeetEcho are not all that great. And if you wish to ask a question or a comment on a presentation, use the MeetEcho tool, presumably the light client if you're here in person, to raise your hand, and so on. Okay, we have a fun little experiment. You can watch MOQ on MOQ. So you still need to use the light client to do any of the interactive stuff. But if you wish to watch the video of this meeting over MOQ, our friends at MeetEcho, who are MOQ enthusiasts, have set something up there. So you see the URL, and you can watch it that way. I'll give you guys just a minute to do that if you're going to do that. Some of you might exit and come back.
It's now in the chat. So yeah, it can go on.
We can go on. Okay.
It's on the chat.
Oh, thank you. All right. A number of upcoming dates. As you know, we don't take a lot of time off in this working group between events. The deadline for our consensus calls on draft updates have fallen a little bit behind. So we have an open one for the draft 18 changes. That closes actually today. So your last chance to take a look at the diff between 18 and 16. Did we do one on 17? Well, whatever. Do the diff of 16 and 18. And if you have any issues with those, then please speak up today. We recently announced our virtual interim schedule between now and October. And you see those dates there. And there have been no comments about our general habit of doing it Monday morning Pacific time, about 9:30. So we're going to keep doing that. But we always do invite comments about those norms. I will also note that 8 September is a Tuesday because of U.S. Labor Day on September 7th. So that is the one exception to our Monday rule. Also, we recently announced our next hybrid interim, which will be in downtown Seattle, Washington. It is a 4-day event. The first 2 days will be interop. People tend to filter in over those 2 days, and then we will do issue discussion on the Wednesday and Thursday of that week. Here's the agenda for today. There have been edits leading up to a few moments ago based on slides that we got and didn't get. You can read it as well as I can read it. So I'll just give you a second to look at it. Would anyone like to bash today's agenda? I will advance to the other session agendas in a moment.
Just confirming with Mike, you're mostly presenting, right? Okay, yep, yeah.
Here is Thursday's agenda. And Fridays. Would anyone like to bash any part of this week's agenda?
Colin Jennings. I mean, The top end filter stuff is super important to us, way more important than many other things here. I'm sad to see it put as the last item on the last day.
Yeah, well, we had a discussion about that. The current status of our last consensus call on that is that it should be an independent, a separate draft, and we've not seen that separate draft.
Can you put an email on the list that is your consensus? Because I do not believe that's a valid consensus.
There's an email on the list about that.
Okay, I'm objecting to that consensus formally right now. How do we proceed with that objection?
I mean, I guess.
I don't, I mean, please send me the information you're basing that on. I don't think, I like, look, just go through it and look at it. I'm willing to be convinced. But I think that it was fairly clear there was not consensus. And you choose to mean, you can routinely take not consensus to mean, therefore we're going to do what I want to do. And I don't think that that's really valid in this case.
We had a show of hands and a call on the list.
Uh-huh.
And the combination of those two things led to a very strong consensus that we should work on it in some form, and
Unclear.
far less than rough consensus that we should bring it into the MOQ draft.
Right. I 100% agree with what you just said. That is different than what you just said a minute ago.
Yes. And from that, we have done a shares decision. I will state this is a shares decision, as you might include that the reasonable thing to get progress on this is to make it as a separate draft. And that's our main request to you. And that also goes actually towards DTS/SSS also, which we also, so I think we're coming down to, because looking at these two PRs for both of these things, it's getting very difficult to follow what's happening when you actually don't have an own repo with its own issue trackers to comment on specifically this. It gets way too confusing.
But on the other ones that were similar to that, a 10-page draft got reduced to, like, I don't know what, 50, 100 lines in the actual document. Like, it's very, very difficult to understand how to insert this into the document, right? And if we want to insert it in the document, then we need to put the things into the document that allow the extension points. And I don't mean IANA code points. I mean places in the algorithms where you say, this is a place where algorithms can be extensible, and here's what you can do in the algorithm. And that seems like a lot more work to me. And we've never had time in the working group where people could spend time discussing these two pros and cons. That's why we don't have consensus yet on what this should be.
I think there's been quite a bit of agenda time, a lot at the top end.
There's been agenda time allocated to discussing the top-end algorithm,
May
not
I
to
break
discussing which of these documents it should be in.
Mike?
Hey, so I think this is a reasonable discussion to have. I'm not sure this is a discussion that needs our face-to-face time. I'm also going to point out, Colin, it is not the chair's job to convince you that there is consensus. It is the chair's job to call consensus, and if you disagree, you can file a complaint or an appeal, and then it would be their chair's job to convince me that there's consensus.
Okay, but I mean, I think Martin and I agree very strongly on it was about 50-50, roughly speaking, and that's not consensus, right? Either way,
Yeah.
right? I think that like, Martin, you and I are on the same page here, right?
I would characterize it the same, but I mean, well, okay. I think I'm going to listen to AD and we can take it offline.
Okay.
You know, I will say, like, we are still pretty far from working last call. There's always a possibility that things could come in. I would suggest that we work those issues separately and then address it later.
But this is a core issue of the draft, which you are deciding to, even though half the working group thinks it should be in, you are deciding to basically not allocate agenda time for repeatedly, meeting after meeting after meeting, right?
Oh,
For this topic.
well, it got substantial time in London.
Can I just clarify one thing? I think what's really useful to move forward is at the last time the consensus was called on this, it was like a 7-7 split about whether or not it should be adopted now merged into the MOQ draft. And the really important point now is to figure out were the 7 that didn't favor merging it right now have objections because it wasn't ready. They weren't there were aspects of it that they wanted to understand better, or there were changes that they wanted to make, or there's just never going to be a time where it's ready for Mach T. That's the point that we need to figure out, because if we address the issues that were opened and then people are still objecting, that's what we need to figure out.
I would love some of this to happen asynchronously rather than all in agenda time, because we have a lot of things to get through. I feel like, well, Top End has received a fair amount of agenda time. I'm not saying it can't get in, but if you could do some, I mean, I think you know who the people are, and if you could maybe coordinate off, asynchronously with them, that would really help us get through the other stuff. Okay, well, obviously not to full satisfaction of the people that are concerned.
Yeah.
Okay,
Let's just,
Magnus and I will discuss maybe doing another one on the list if we feel there's been a lot of movement on that issue. Okay. All right. Any other agenda bashes? Okay. Now it's up to our Alan to talk about what's changed with the Mach T draft since Shenzhen.
Is there a way to make this? There we go. The world's biased against short people. Hey, everybody. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so there's been 2 draft updates since Shenzhen. Draft 18 was published on May 12th. That is our current interop target. Draft 19 was published just a couple of weeks ago. There are definitely some people who've already started trying 19, which is great. But we're still targeting 18 for the broader group. This presentation covers them both together. If you want to know which feature actually landed in which of those drafts, you can see there's a changelog at the bottom of the document. And our next interop target is likely going to be draft 20, and we will cut that in about 8 weeks from now, which will be 4 weeks before our next hybrid interop. Okay, so what's happened? We've landed 72 PRs, which are averaging 3.6 per week, so that's a lot. And there have been about 1,000 new net lines in the draft, which are new features. There's been a significant work done on to go take our security considerations to another level, a lot of clarifying text, and there's IANA tables, and actually I've noticed that about 10% of the line total comes from the changelog itself. So I think the headline thing that's been added in terms of features and changing the sort of surface area of the API is range filters, which have been presented in both interims and full IETF. So we'll go through it a little bit quickly to give you a summary of what's there. It closes a very old feature request from a couple of years ago. And now as a subscriber, you can filter your responses based on priority, subgroup ID, object ID, and integer property values. You can express all the relevant spaceship operators. There is a set ID concept that you can use to create and or combinations that are which should give you pretty much all the flexibility you need to filter stuff. For property filters in particular, there's 2 different modes, and this I think caused a little bit of confusion, but I think we understand what they mean, which is that for when you're making a subscription and you add a property filter, that is matching against object properties that are accompany the objects in the data plane. If you include a property filter in a subscribe tracks control message in particular, that matches against track properties only in the control plane. And if there is no match, there will be no subscription. And so you don't get a chance to do the other kind. And this has implications for how you do like gap processing logic in a fetch response, for example, when there's filters, because you're not going to get some stuff and you don't know if it got filtered or if it just never existed in the first place. We talked about our URL scheme, I think in Shenzhen and Boulder. So this is now landed in. So we now defined at least the basics of how Mach T URLs work. I think there's a couple outstanding issues yet about some refinements, but like the core thing is there. So the basic idea is you open a quick connection and you can include both the H3 and Mach T ALPNs in there. If the server picks H3, that means if you want to get Mach, you're going to try web transport next and use WT protocol negotiation to get your version. There's similar logic for TCP and H2 in there. Actually, is there? I'm not sure. Okay. We've also defined a media type for a MOQ session. This is the type of the MOQ session resource, the one you're connecting to. It is not the type of the actual media like video and audio and et cetera. The reason we did this is we wanted to use the URL fragment to have specific meaning to MOQ clients. And you can't do that unless you have a media type. So we have defined a media type, and the fragment has the structure you see there, where it starts with a type identifier, which has a registry in our document. And so MSF is the key example. They have like identified their type and then said after that colon, what happens there and how MSF is supposed to interpret that. This fragment is always stripped out of the URL. It's never sent on the wire. It's handled by the client. I'm just gonna like pause a second. If anybody have any questions about this, this is the kind of crowd that's likely to have URL questions. Okay. Other things that have changed in the control plane relative to subscriptions. So you already heard me mention subscribe tracks. You might have been like, what's subscribe tracks? So we had one message subscribe namespace, which is how a subscriber can solicit, usually from a relay, information about who else is connected to that relay and what you can do. So that has been divided sort of into two different verbs. Now, subscribe namespace is for discovery. It will tell you just about other namespaces that are available there, versus subscribe tracks is what we've a long time ago historically called wildcard subscribe. And that is just giving you like the actual tracks themselves. And subscribe tracks has also been updated. You automatically exclude your own published tracks. Let's see, a few other things. Group order came out of publish OK. It's either specified in subscribe tracks for all publishes that are under that subscribe tracks, or if a publisher is initiating publish, sort of, I don't call it a naked publish or an unsolicited publish, they just get to unilaterally decide what the group order is going to be because we don't let you update it. We now allow multiple subscriptions to the same track, which has been a restriction we've had for a long time that we removed. The use case we are targeting for this is primarily cases where we can't necessarily, if you're changing between one subscription and another and we couldn't guarantee the ordering. Therefore, we took the minimalist approach to deduplication, which is like, there's no deduplication. So it doesn't matter. The publisher can give both the subscriptions the same track alias, but the doc says like every one they're treated like completely independent subscribers. So the same object is going to come on the wire twice, even though the subscriber couldn't possibly use two copies of it. They'll look exactly the same for the most part. And subscribers, if they had filters on like subscription A had one set of filters and subscription B had a different set of filters, even though the publisher knew which one of those subscriptions it matched, the subscriber needs to refilter. Request update now has concurrency limits, and you can you can coalesce the processing of, if you get multiple of them, you can condense that into one.
Yeah, real quick, do we say anything about if there's a group order conflict between different subscribers?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear your question.
Do we say anything about if there's a group order conflict between different subscribers? How would the relay subscribe upstream?
This is a problem that's not new. We've had this problem, and I think it's similar in some ways to subscriber priority, which is that, like, because group order on a subscription is just an
priority. We kind of
priority.
Relay's going to do just what Relay's going to do.
That relays take the information that they have from their downstream subscribers and make the best decision they can upstream. So if you get a conflict, then the relay gets to decide. But we usually say like these parameters are hop by hop. So
just relay choice, basically, same as priority.
Yes. Body control plane cleanup. So when we talked to you last, the brand new thing was that we just moved, I'll say, to a more HTTP-like model where every request has its own bidirectional control plane. We discovered when we sat down to implement that it actually, we were not as crisp about what it means for each side to send a fin, to send a reset, or send a stop sending. So we spent a fair amount of time figuring out how that is supposed to work and have written that down. We removed required request ID as an ordering constraint. So when we first went to BiDi streams, we said, okay, we need the ability to reconstruct the ordering of the control stream. And we had this required request ID concept in there that lets you do that. However, we found that this caused a bunch of problems. It had sort of an unbounded state problem. And so we took a step back, we looked at some other mechanisms, and then we tried to analyze the use cases of when did people really care about the ordering, and at least in our London conversation, it seemed like everyone was pretty sure that the only time that it really matters when you're trying to really do some sort of a switch where you want to pause one track and resume another. And so there is an open PR for a new parameter called switch from. We'll talk about it, I think, a few slides from now in more detail. But essentially, we're using that as that's our new target for like bringing in ordering constraint or coordination, cross-track coordination. There's now a redirect error response and the ability to migrate an individual subscription, which is another feature that we have added. On instaxability, there's now a code point range that can indicate that a track property is mandatory to understand. And so this is just to prevent a publisher from sending to something to a subscriber that they know is not going to work. And so if you have such a property that so changes how a subscriber might interact with a track that you can't even deliver it to them, then you can reserve a code point in this range for your property. And we also took the very first tuple of MOQ track namespaces, and we have reserved some of them. So the first track tuple that is just a single dot is forever reserved, and no one is allowed to use it. If it is a dot and the word session, this is a special extensibility mechanism which is handled entirely within the MOQ layer itself, and this never goes to an application. So use cases for this might be like you want to expose information about like the congestion control or something and have that delivered via a track. You can have it you can use this as an extensibility point to register that track as like sort of a, my session is owning this rather than the application. And then if you want to start with a dot and anything else, we just said you need to register an IANA code point for that. But it gets passed to the application. So if we come up with something clever, like well-known, in the future, we know that people will have to check in with us via an IANA registry. Okay, data plane, what's going on there? We added a bit in the subgroup header to indicate if that subgroup starts with the first object ever published in that subgroup. And I think we added this for reasons where like, for caches or other reasons. So it's just very useful to know, like we already had a bit that was like, the last object in this group is the last one ever, but we didn't have a first, so it's sort of symmetric. We have taken delivery timeout and split it into two different types. There is an object delivery timeout, which is your favorite delivery timeout that we've had for a couple of years now. And now there is a subgroup delivery timeout, which is, I believe they can be used together. The primary difference is that a subgroup timeout only applies once you have seen the end of the subgroup. So you've seen the fin, or you have some other, if you're the original publisher, you know that the subgroup is over. So you just start the timer to later, versus the object one is really an object by object timeout. And people had different use cases. So we said, okay, we can just have both. And we've defined them both to be either track properties or object properties, meaning that this is useful for subgroups. You can have different subgroups have different timeouts. So your base layer may have a much longer timeout, and enhancement layer might have a shorter one to keep things fresh. There is a new parameter for fetch called fill timeout. This is for, it represents like a budget that the publisher has to fill any gaps, really for relays, to fill any gaps in its cache. So if it encounters a hole, it has to go upstream. Eventually, if this budget is exhausted, instead of trying to go figure out what is in the gap, it just returns this unknown status field we added sometime last year. And there are now also padding streams and padding datagrams, which can be used by a sender to probe available bandwidth. Okay, a few editorial highlights. Like as I mentioned before, there's been a lot of work on security considerations. I think there's a lot more. There's a couple PRs in flight, several issues that are open. Obviously, it's very important to get the right level of detail in there. So, but it's a big step up. So thank you for people who worked on it. There's some guidance about what you can do with zero RTT, which is good. We also renamed what were previously called message payloads to be called message body in control messages, just because we thought maybe payload might confuse people with what's going on in the data plane. And the message called publish blocked is now called publish skipped. And that was hopefully going to give people the clear, like more clarity that you're not going to get it later unless you ask for it. Okay, this was a slide that I presented at the last IETF, and we were very excited. We had just cracked the 100 issue level in the correct direction. All these numbers were green compared to the previous IETF. And we said that our dream was that we were going to get to issue 0 sometime after this meeting. And I'm just going to kind of go through. So we were on our way. As of May 12th, we were down to 69 issues. Half of those were editorial issues, and several of the remainder had open PRs or needs PR labels. And we had dedicated our virtual interims in that set of months to like these big rocks that we still had ongoing, and I think we made some important decisions there. Filters made it in, for example. And then at the London interim, only a month ago, we like discussed and we made decisions on almost every outstanding issue that we still had. So like things were going really great. It looks sort of like this. This is the issue count over time. And you can see like the editors and the authors were, this didn't come for free. Like there was a lot of effort going in to like drive this count down to where we were. And then people started implementing draft 18. We obviously knew that was people are gonna find issues. Like that's not unexpected, it's welcome. And then same deal in the interim, we sit together, we talk, and people are like, hey, did we think about this thing or that thing? So like that caused another little spike. We then had an extremely detailed review that really changed the landscape of what the work it was that we thought we had in front of us. And again, we do welcome extremely detailed reviews. I will say editors know that the editorial state overall of the document is not ideal, and we will plan to address it. So we would prefer, we already have 50 open editorial issues. If you want to file an editorial PR for something that's bothering you, please do. But otherwise, just know we're going to take care of that later. So we don't need, I'm not saying all these issues were editorial, but a chunk of them were. So, and then, we took that as a reset and, kind of picked up our cadence and we are where we are, but the graph is essentially flat. We're not going to get to issue 0 shortly after this meeting. So this is how it really looks. There's now a bunch of issues that are all related to auth. We formed an auth design team. I'm super excited that we're going to get recommendations and they're going to cover some of their work they've done so far. Hopefully on these issues. Almost every other category has had an increase in the number of issues, and the total gap, at least compared to March, can almost exclusively be captured in the editorial column. But I will say that if we're adding 13 issues every IETF cycle, we're not going to finish. So that's a problem. So how are we going to get there? And I thought about this, and I really think that it comes down to two things: focus and effort. So if you look at what this group has, like our attention is very divided. There's many adopted drafts. So we have LOC, MSF, CMSF, CAT for MOQ, Privacy Pass, Secure Objects. I think that's everything that's adopted. Maybe I missed some. But we also have extensions, SSTS, Top N, Tempo, which is something new. But then people I know are working always constantly on applications, demos, and there's like individual drafts. And we absolutely need so many of these pieces to have like a fully functional ecosystem. And in as much as they inform transport requirements, we need that work to happen. But also, if mock transport never ships, none of those drafts mean anything. So we need to find the right balance of okay, we're giving the attention we need to these things, but I think the community needs mock transport to stabilize. And I think in order to stabilize, we need people to focus on it, and we need the effort. Frankly, the reviews and updates for PRs is too slow, and asynchronous engagement on issues in GitHub is poor. We only really get things done when we grab 90 minutes of your synchronous time every 2 weeks, and that slows us down. So again, the ask from the editors is let's take a breath and try to really nail down as many things we have. I don't know how many people remember, but this is the birthplace of mock. The first mock BOF was here 4 years ago. So let's not make it another 4 years. And so that's my plea to you. Does anybody have any questions about any of this? Rohan.
During the agenda bash, I almost asked this question, but I've decided to wait for this slide. So we have 3 sessions. If this is actually important, then maybe we shouldn't talk about the stuff on Friday.
That particular ask is slightly complicated because I am going to miss the meeting on Friday. But you're more than welcome to resolve all the issues in my absence.
So this working group is unusual in the extent of synchronous time we have outside of big IETF. We have hybrid interims that are about 15 hours of discussion, and we have 90-minute virtual interims every 2 weeks. So the chairs have made a conscious decision to make big IETF meetings be a little bit at a higher altitude for some of us that are maybe not following things quite as carefully and getting really in the weeds and all this other synchronous time we have.
Yep. I understand that. I appreciate that. But by bringing these issues up, you make people think about it. You distract people who would be paying attention even between the interims, potentially from spending more time on transport or on LOC or secure objects. Right?
Okay, well, I think we're slotted for about 90 minutes on MOQ issues this week, if I'm not mistaken, which is kind of a lot for a single draft.
And if I
the
could jump
IETF.
in, I don't necessarily think that it's a lack of the synchronous time that's slowing us down. It's more about if you file an issue and then the editors are quick to engage on that issue. Like if you don't have a response on your issue from an editor in 2 or 3 days, that's very unusual. You will usually get one the same day. Like we see you and we want to help you, but you may have filed your issue and you disappear. And now we can't progress that issue anymore. We have to wait until a virtual interim to bring that up. Or if you file a PR and you will get a review from the editors on your PR, usually within a week at most, and we will provide you feedback. But then if you don't update that PR for a while, then it's going to languish. Or, we have people who are whose approval we need in order to merge. And we need those people to be reviewing things in a timely way. Like that's more an obstacle, I think, than the actual synchronous time. We bring the synchronous time, the big discussions we can't resolve asynchronously.
Okay.
If no one else has anything, I am all done.
Can you call the next one? I can do it. Never mind.
Yeah, I was going to ask to sign. So, Mo?
It's a lock, right?
Yeah.
All right. Clicker's there. Set the timer. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to give an update on the low overhead container media format. So there were actually 2 revisions that were pushed, 3 and 4, mostly around the properties and the INA registries for them. To remind everyone, the properties were the metadata that we used to have as object headers in the MOQ object, and then we moved into the payload of the MOQ object. And now we've actually gone in 2 different directions. We have the public properties, which are still in the MOQ object header, and then we have the private properties that are actually inside of the MOQ object payload. And so that was a change in O2, but just to recap, that's what the properties are that we're referencing in the rest of this deck. And so in version 3, we added a new property for the audio config. For video, there was already a video config because almost every video codec requires some kind of initialization data like that. A lot of audio codecs don't, like Opus, but some do, like AAC. And so now we added this audio config property for those codecs that need it. And similar to video, it maps directly to the web codec's audio decoder config. And the description property and that is the exact byte stream that you would put inside of your AAC raw. I think it's called the audio specific config. And so this is a new track or object property, and it's a length prefixed type 0F. And then we revised all of the properties because there were multiple collisions, and there were still some collisions even after that. So that's why we had to do a rev update again to do an 04. And so the way things stand right now is we have the time scale and timestamp, those were already in MOQ-T, but they had the wrong number. So we did a PR against MOQ-T to fix that also. And then MOQ-T didn't have the rest of these things. So we did a PR to MOQ-T to add the rest of these things as well. And then there was also a conflict with secure objects. Secure objects did not appear in the MOQ-T registry. And so other drafts wouldn't know whether or not they're colliding with it. So we did a PR against that to add the secure objects extensions as well, properties as well. So now this is the exhaustive list of all of the properties in LOQ, and they're also reflected in MOQ-T now. The issues that were closed, track properties, they're not going to be, there's no facility to authenticate them. Everybody seemed to be okay with that. The property collision we just talked about, we're not doing LOQ without MOQ. We don't have a facility to carry LOQ over some other protocol. Frameworking was changed. Instead of using a variant, is now using explicit lengths. And the audio config property we just talked about, and the INF feedback was also the registry collisions. Things that are left open, the one that probably merits some discussion is the first one, frame durations. So those are requests put in about identifying how long each video frame is, and so having a frame duration property on each object. And there was, ways to delta compress it and eliminate it if it's static or constant. But some people feel like there should be an expression of duration, at least for video frames. Anyone that feels whether we should or should not, happy to hear it in the room or on the list.
There's a queue.
Alan Frindell. My comment was actually a couple slides back on the collisions. I think I left this comment before, which is that, we'll end up renumbering everything in MOQ-T when we get to the end, so that like everything that we reserve in that draft is like all numeric from 0. And I think that'll cause churn here too. So have we thought about just like saying that like secure objects, you're starting at, I don't know, pick a number, 80 instead of 00, and then LOQ, you're starting at 90 or something similar. So that just, granted, we should be now keeping things organized in the mock transport as like a placeholder, so we don't keep stepping on each other, but I can't promise that we won't anymore, because as you've noted, it's flawed. So anyway, that was just my idea.
Yeah, this is about the 4th time that this has happened. So yeah, if we wanted to do a formal, range allocation for each draft, we could do that.
I know you don't need to be formal, because I imagine you'll renumber as well when we get closer, but just as an ongoing, so not step on each other.
I'd say let's leave it as is now, and any new registrations, we'll give a number for LOQ, give a number for MSF, give a number for secure objects, and everybody use that as their starting point.
Will?
Yeah, Will Law Akamai, a very similar question to what Alan did about the properties, right? If you look at the registration, I think MOQ-T reserves a property space 0x7a and up for application usage. And I would think LOQ's an application. So for MSF, I didn't register in the property table in MOQ-T. I just allowed MSF to use the application defined space and registered them in MSF. Should we do something similar for LOQ and not even be in this table, and therefore avoid all this collision problems that we're having?
I remember I forget the exact numeric ranges, but the point about LOQ is we wanted to have the small 1 byte range.
Yeah,
because
there is a 1 byte range.
Yeah.
Well, 0. Yeah. Okay. I guess it's slightly larger. Okay.
I think there are a few of these application specific. The thing that can happen with those is that you can have 10 different applications hitting your relay that all have assigned different meanings to those points. So if your relay ever needs to do something with it, and there's no way to necessarily know which application is going through an object belongs to, we don't have like a content type header. So these are, they're nice in that there's this range of 1 byte codes. Anybody can use them and they're never going to collide, but it's not super useful in that the relays can't really necessarily be like, oh, here's the LOQ timestamp if you put the local timestamp there, if they need
Right.
it for some reason.
But Alan, are relays meant to be using audio level, video config, audio config? I don't think they are, right?
I don't know.
So, okay, so I would like some feedback on for MSF. Should we be doing what Mo's doing here and claiming registering property types in MOQT, or should we continue to reuse? I'll bring that up in the MSF section.
Rowan, May, to answer Will's question, I mean, I think there are some properties here that you would need as a relay to, for example, do speaker selection. So even if the content was encrypted. Thanks.
Okay, so there's a general open issue about numbering of the properties and whether we should use application or common property values for things. So I think probably good to follow up on the list about this. I wanted to make sure that people give some comments and feedback about the open issues, which is first and foremost, like I said, the frame durations. I really want an answer about whether or not we should add that into the log properties. Web Codex does have a duration. It's not required by Decoder, but there is a field in Web Codex for frame durations for both audio and video objects. So,
Colin, please be brief if you can.
I will try to be brief. Colin Perkins, University of Glasgow. Just on the open issues and the parameter values. If you haven't done so already, and it's possible you have because I haven't been following this that closely, I would encourage you to look at the types of things we ended up adding when we were doing RTP to decide whether you want to include them, whether you want to possibly leave space to include them in future, or whether you are explicitly excluding them, and make sure you have space in your parameter ranges and make sure you've taken these into account, so you don't end up with in a horrible mess down the line if you realize you need to add them later.
yeah, thanks. Good feedback. Yeah, we've heard some similar things about video orientation and all the things that are registered by WebRTC, by RTP, by other specs. All right, that's it.
Thanks, Mo. Next up is Colin, secure objects.
Thanks. Okay, so secure objects. There's been very few change. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the changes going since the previous IETF, but mostly I'll just focus on the ones that have happened since our last interim meeting, which is pretty minimal. So there's not a lot changed in here. So a bunch of work done on describing the threat model. We've talked about that previously. This mostly came addressing many thanks to Magnus for a great review on that, and just tried to get clear on the type of things that we protect against and the type of things we don't protect against. Didn't change the protocol that much. One of the attacks that hadn't been described in there, that's one of the ones that we think about a lot, that is a different attack in this type of environment from many other environments where we do security designs, is because you can cause a message to fan out to lots of subscribers. A relay that was a bad relay might be able to send. It might have 1 million downstream subscribers that it tries a different attack on each one of those millions. So it allows it to really multiply how fast it can try attacks quite rapidly. So there was some discussion about that and implications to the key length changes from it. Again, it didn't change fundamentally how this worked or any of the things on it. It was just part of the analysis of it. We moved to all fixed width integers to just make it very clear how they're canonic. So basically 64-bit integers in the security places where we're canonicalizing them for security reasons. They're still all variable and short when they're sent over the wire, but in the place that we're going to take a bunch of numbers and we need to expand them to a common byte order before we compute a hash over of them to check some security property, we just move that all to 64-bit integers basically. The Mo brought up that this may be useless. So we moved the publisher priority to be recommended to, was one of the, or not to be recommended, it's one of the things that's covered by the end-to-end authentication. So it's not encrypted. Obviously the relays have to read it, but they can't change it because we're like, well, there's no reason for the relays to change this. Mo points out the relays can do whatever they want. I mean, even if they don't change it, they can still decide to prioritize or ignore it or do whatever they wanted. So this is a very fake savings. It's like, you can't change this number, but you're welcome to ignore it. So maybe this was a bad change. I don't know. I'd welcome any comments one way or another towards this one way or another.
Alan Frindell. So one question I have is, 'cause we have, we're talking about the possibility of updating the default publisher priority and how that can end up being a little bit racy at times. And it's like, well, you know, sort of we haven't landed that on the spec yet, but it seems like we might. And if we do, then is that going to impact this, where like, it's not that it even really is wrong, but it just got compressed or decompressed strangely. And when you do, I don't know enough about the crypto here, but is it clear that, oh, the priority was the thing that was broken, or will it look like the whole object, somebody touched something and we don't know what?
It would look like the whole object was broken. You can't tell what part of the object was broken. So I see your point on that. But I think the part that's racy in our whole changes of that was how the changes happen, which wouldn't change on this, is when the data was encrypted, it would know what was the right priority was. That would be the priority represented in the data. And that part of delivering the priority, publisher priority, is not racy. So I don't think it's an issue. The part that's racy is getting it is sort of how we deliver. But again, that, like, we could think about that more. And if it's an issue, that's a showstopper. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
like you'd have to pull this out.
Yeah,
Right.
I would, like, I don't think that maybe you can construct an application in which, knowing that nobody screwed with the priority, like if someone's touched the priority, I don't want to look at that object because I don't know anything about it. But like, that seems overkill to me. And like, if we just tell people like, this is not authenticated, so don't put, if your relay is super important, dependent on some number, you can put it in, you can protect that thing, but not this one.
Okay. I don't think this really helps anything by protecting it. So maybe I think I got a little bit overzealous, and I will take this out as feedback on this and go with most suggested. Just remove publisher priority from being one of the authenticated fields. Is that thumbs up from people? Okay. Sounds good.
I was just going to say that the semantics, like, you could have two different semantics. One is a thing that the publisher indicates what it would like the priority to be from the beginning, and the other is what is the actual priority that relays apply to it.
Okay, so that whoever's doing minutes got that in the minutes.
So basically, I mean, it sounds like people do not see a value in having a publisher indicated.
The only people who read this are the relays, right? Like,
yeah.
And they can do anything, and it gets overridden by 5 other priorities in 5 other places. It's like, you know, yeah. Okay. So the object IDs are limited to 32 bits in this. We're sort of discussing on the side some ideas of maybe changing that, but right now I don't think that those are a good idea. I'm not recommending that. I'm recommending we leave them the way they are for right now. So there may be a little bit of discussion in this one, but just to understand where it is. If you're using secure objects, you're basically limited to object IDs that fit in 32 bits. You're welcome to use group IDs that are for the full 64 bits. And the reason is so that we can fit this in a 96-bit nonce, which has some security performance or some performance increases for a bunch of the common crypto we use. We cleaned up a little bit this padding. So it has the ability to add padding to the packet that is in the encrypted portion of the packet, so an attacker can't tell how much padding was added. And this just allows you, if you are concerned about you're using a voice codec that perhaps by the variable size of the codec reveals something about the signal, about what the actual audio is or something like that. There is concerns about some of the audio codecs on that. But there's many other cases where the length of the data might reveal data to the attacker. This gives you a way to expand all your packets to be a common size or a common set of sizes, or to otherwise obfuscate the information that might be left. And it's exactly what you'd expect. Some padded, you add some padded data in the encrypted area. let's see. We discussed previously, the track properties are not secured by this. We fixed a bunch of just things that had gotten inconsistent in the draft over time, and we added a bunch of, oops, I cannot seem to, there. Okay, we have the IANA registries don't match, as previously discussed. We'll, of course, map those up. They don't match in multiple ways, the numbers, the names, etc. But we need to align all of those correctly as this stuff gets finalized. And maybe I'm missing a slide on here or skipped it, but we added a bunch of test vectors as well. So next steps on this, there's a couple implementations, Rust and TypeScript. We've been playing with this in various forms, a couple different groups. And at this point, I think that this draft is really ready for working group last call. And so that's sort of the state that I would like to see happen with it next. Now, I believe in finishing things and wrapping them up and not having to discuss them more. It doesn't mean it would necessarily get published. It would be, it would probably be waiting for the MOQ transport draft to have its IANA registry table set up first, right? So it'd be blocked for a long period of time. But I would like to sort of just wrap this draft up and call it done. Any thoughts on that from people of big things they know they want done to this draft before we call it done?
Yeah, I think it is pretty much done, but the recent discussion about the object ID, I think it does merit considering Magnus's proposal to go back and look at the nonces and see if the 96 can really go to 128. I think the extra room there is for key IDs, right? And so you want to figure out how much of that is really necessary for the key IDs.
Between posting the initial comment later, I found out that it's fairly strict in the IETF defined AIDs to be 12 bytes or 96 bits. So
absolute hard number.
Yes.
And that's because the carve out of the other 4 bytes is for key IDs?
No, it's the nonce. Just for the nonce, it's 12 bytes. So that's
but the whole point of the nonce is unique with a certain key, right? So
yeah.
To invoke your AES with you're going to invoke with a 128-bit thing, and the upper 32 is some key ID, right?
No. This is it identifies the key, and then from the key you use 12 bytes nonces. Yeah.
I can walk you through all this one offline. And the other thing too is this is regularly misconceived at IETF. ASGCM does support numbers other than 96. It's just when you use anything other than 96, there's an extra hash that happens on every packet that's quite slow. So it's a pretty serious performance impact.
Okay, so we're stuck with the 32-bit object IDs.
Probably
that's unfortunate.
Yeah, exactly. We talked about 4848, and everybody, when they looked at their applications, was like, actually, really, it's the group ID things that we want to be able to use the full group. And it's really questionable why the object IDs even go to 64 bits in the use cases we have in the working group anyway, inside of a single group. It was just, we used a varant and it goes to 64. It wasn't really a driven requirement. So I think people felt much stronger about using the bits towards the group than the other way around.
Hey, Rowan again. So I kind of am a little uncomfortable with the idea. Like, I think the document is pretty close to damn done, but whether last call is appropriate before we really finish with MOQ-T, like, I just think we would need another working group last call. And that might be okay, but I don't know if there's a way that we can put it in a parking lot until then.
Yeah, so I know other groups have done kind of a freeze call, decided to say, okay, we do a review now. If everyone agrees, we think it's ready, we put it on the parking lot until the relevant normative reference is ready, so we can do the final review when they go through. I think that might be a model for this in this case.
I mean, I view most documents have more than one working group last call, and I did not say we should send it to the ISG. I said we should working group last call it, and then probably wait for the other things that it needs before it goes to the ISG. But it would make it easier to get the security area to review it and things like that. Yep.
Okay, so you would like to, so your preferred state, medium-term state for this is a first working group last call and maybe a early sec review.
At sec review, broader review, and then probably, ask the AD if they want it before MOQ and that they sit on it, or whether the working group sits on it. But basically, either the AD or the working group sits on it.
Okay.
Yep.
So Hus, I think +1 to having kind of do a first working group last call, because the last few edits mainly are on the editorial nature more than changing anything in design. And also the dependency on MOQ code transport is like, since we depend on the object model that's been stable for a while. So that kind of proves that the object model for the MOQ code transport is working. And I would like to see if we can continue that way. Thanks.
Alan from Dell. I think, I mean, what Suhas just said about the object model, I mean, this 32, like object IDs, like, should we be considering constraining object IDs in MOQ more? Because the security properties of like, oops, I accidentally used the same nonce twice seems bad because so, I mean, that's sort of concerning, and I don't know, will the security area or somebody, if you have a normative reference to MOQ-T, and MOQ-T is undergoing the level of churn that we know it is, how much of MOQ-T do they need to read, or are we saying we're freezing the components that this depends on?
Now, what they need to review, even if we change them, isn't going to change their review, right? We're not changed that much. And like, no, I just want to be clear that the current design of this is, if you try and use secure object on something that's larger than 32 bits, you're going to get an error in the code. The code says you should not do that, right? You just can't do it, versus the wrapping things. And so there's not a foot gun there.
Okay.
We could add a foot gun, but like,
Let's
I think
not.
the more we talk about that, the more we decide not to. Yeah. So I think that stuff's fine. And the parts of MOQ that we're changing are not the stuff that's going to change the security review of this.
My other concern about going to working last call, I mean, I think it's good to get more review. However, I'll note that it looks like both implementations come from the same place. And so it would be really good to have at least one other completely clean room implementation that's came from some other set of people who looked at your spec and implemented it. And we showed interoperability between those implementations. I don't know if that is like, I don't know if that's blocking review or not. I mean, it's still reviewable, but will drive more things than we think.
I certainly wouldn't be sad to see another implementation, of course, but like, it's not a normal IETF step to require that. So, yeah.
Mo, please be brief.
My one concern is this is an encapsulation, and what we've learned from like things in RTP, like the SRTP encapsulation, didn't anticipate other encapsulations like FEC or something else. Then we asked, now when you do these things, which one comes first in the ordering and all that. And so when you try to apply secure objects to something new in the future, is that new thing going to have to specify a bunch of stuff about secure objects, like loc had to specify a bunch of stuff, or can they use it generically? And if they use it generically, if there's some other wrapper that does something else not security related, then do we have to worry about the interplay of those? If we thought about the model for how that would work, that's my only concern about. As a draft by itself, it looks great. It's ready to go. But if we add something else later, does that something break?
I mean, we've thought about that a bunch, and
wrapper.
I think that it supports, like, it doesn't specify whether other containers go inside or out of it, but it works with both of them. It can go inside other containers. It could have other containers inside of it. And I think that that's the best we can do in a generic way.
I would like to ask a question as chair. If, say, we gave this another 6 to 12 months, is anyone likely to, is there likely to be an additional implementation of this draft given that time frame? Just raise your hand if you're like, yeah, we'll probably implement that if you give me a little more time. Okay, so I don't see anyone in the room or online saying that. So it doesn't look like we'll get another implementation if we just wait. So maybe that's not a consideration. Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Colin. Okay. So next up is the auth design team report, and the lead of that team is Mike, and he's going to come up and share the happenings. Clicker.
Thank you. So I'm Mike English from Cloudflare, and I was assigned this auth design team. So I'm not.
You did volunteer.
I did volunteer.
But you didn't volunteer to be
participate.
leader.
Yeah,
You volunteered to be
So
leader. Yes.
I am not an authentication or authorization expert, but I am going to do my best to summarize some of the things that we've discussed so far. There are a bunch of other wonderful people who have been contributing to this, including the people who volunteered on the list ahead of forming the design team, and some others who have also contributed ideas. In particular, Thibaut had an extensive conversation with him yesterday and got a lot of useful feedback on some of our discussions and ideas. So this is mostly an update. We're kind of exploring the design space, but I want to give people some context on what we're working through. These are kind of the topics that we were given to work on, and we plan to come back to the working group by October with some answers on these things. We are also taking on ownership of the auth tagged issues on the draft. So those are also things that are part and parcel of all the other auth things that we're working on. Okay. So one big thing, and this was kind of the impetus of starting this focused design team, is the need for a mechanism in mock transport to communicate a challenge. So you can't just provide a bearer token. If you want to do proof of possession, you need some way to have a challenge and response exchange that also occurs. So we've done some POCs with Privacy Pass in particular, where we have kind of used the error response as a way to smuggle this challenge through. But that's not super clean, and it's not really what we should be doing. So at some point, we're going to need some new messages on the wire as a way to communicate that. But in order to make sure that we're doing that correctly, we wanted to explore kind of the whole design space and say, okay, what does auth look like more generally? And there's a number of different configurations and use cases that have different requirements. This is maybe the key thing here. MOQ is a protocol that allows for fan out. So if you just have to do hop by hop authorization, that's relatively simple. Questions arise when you hit this boundary where you are now aggregating subscriptions and you need to make decisions about trust boundaries and where things are being authenticated and authorized. So in this simple example, subscriber 1 auths to the relay. It wants to subscribe to a track that originates with P1, the original publisher. R1, then can authenticate upstream. Exactly what that means, we'll get to. But that session is then established, and a track is pulled, and track flows to S1. Then a second subscriber arrives and also authenticates. And now we have questions. Can we reuse this data? Can we share this with this other subscriber? It depends on the use case. So in a broadcast scenario, it's a little bit more straightforward what this might mean and how the trust boundaries might work. So for example, you may have multiple relays in a tiered configuration, but all of the subscribers can have their authentication handled at the edge relay. So you can say there's a trust boundary here at the edge, and then the relay to relay auth could be a separate auth that happens due to whatever business relationships exist between these entities. And then also upstream to the original publisher, whether that's a client or a server or whatever. So basically, if you can delegate the responsibility of checking these things to the relays, your life gets a lot simpler. However, there are use cases where that may not be true. And this is where things get a little bit more complicated. If, for example, you have an application where you have a requirement that the original publisher directly authenticate, including proof of possession and subscribers, then you need to thread through the relay somehow the challenge response and a bunch of state needed for all of the subscribers. And if this could differ from one subscriber to another, you potentially lose some of the benefits of the efficiencies of aggregation. So there's this inherent tension in MOQ transport protocol. Like, we want to be able to do efficient fan out, but that constrains other things that we're trying to do. So if we want to individually authenticate each subscriber with the original publisher, then the original publisher needs to individually authenticate each subscriber, which is, placing that responsibility back on the original publisher, more load, etc. So one possible solution to this problem is to sample the subscribers that are coming in. And so you take only a subset of them based on some configuration. And for that subset, you then relay things upstream and make the original publisher responsible for authentication. This is workable potentially, but very complicated. And this is what Thibaut and I spent a couple hours talking about yesterday. I think it's doable, and I think that the use case, the requirements here may be real, but it gets awfully complicated to do kind of end-to-end things like this. So if it is at all possible, it is preferable to find ways to push the information needed to make authentication, authorization decisions down to the relays. Because if you can delegate that responsibility, then you can retain the fan-out properties that you want. So a third potential model would be to communicate the policy that the original publisher may have and whatever ancillary information is required to make decisions in the session authentication. So in the token or whatever is used in setup exchange between the publisher and the relay. And then the relay can take that policy into account in making its decisions about end subscribers, which I didn't think is something that would appeal to me, but in some ways it's simpler than the second case. Yes, Ted?
Ted Hardy, occasionally confused privacy enthusiast. In the case we were talking about before,
yes.
Which you call proof of possession and I would call challenge response, what the challenge response is meant to do is to take information that should be known only to the subscriber and create a hash such that the original publisher can confirm that this hash is the hash that they would expect from one of its subscribers. And so that they can keep like a table of what the hashes would be for the different subscribers, do a quick search against that, whoop, hash matches, you're good to go. To pass all of that information down to the relay so that the relay can do that, what you could do is provide that giant hash table. The difficulty with that is that actually then contains a lot of information about your subscriber base, its size, its characteristics, to the relay, which seems like a relationship we did not originally presume would be present between a publisher and a relay who is meant, principally just to fan this stuff out.
Right.
It gets even worse if the situation is such that you can't create such a hash table, right? That if it's something that the time of day or something else feeds into this, so that they actually have to have the equivalent keying material to P1 in R1 in order to make this decision. Again, you're really, really changing the relationship between R1 and P1, or, and here's where the privacy bit comes in, forcing S3 in this case, to reveal things to R1 that they would not necessarily have revealed to a relay if the authentication were passed through to P1. So I think as the design team works through this space, I really encourage you to think about not just the characteristics of this from the purposes of scaling, and they're very difficult scaling characteristics for this when you have large numbers of subscribers, certainly at the, is this person in Denver level, where you're doing it by subscription rather than by geolocation. But also the privacy characteristics of how it will actually work in the field, because some of the ways you would get scale with this in a deployment would hurt the privacy of the subscribers quite substantially, because they'd basically have to reveal information to the relay that would otherwise be private. So I encourage you to think carefully about it as you guys go through the rest of the process. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got a decent queue. Jonathan.
Jonathan Lennox. I mean, it seems like CDNs for HTTP must already solve this. What do they do?
That's, yeah, basically. Yeah, there's
yeah,
so
and I mean,
there's
I
a boundary
honestly, I
here,
feel like,
and there's hop to hop.
I mean, there's
Things
at
that
some level, I feel like if like you're doing either secure objects or the CMAF equivalent thereof, I don't care that much if you get the encrypted data if you can't decrypt it.
Right. And yeah, and this is a very good point. Like, I forgot to mention this earlier, but I meant to tie directly to Cullen's presentation that like you can assume that the payload itself can be encrypted, and so that's not necessarily a concern. Where it gets more complicated is if you want to key that in such a way as to efficiently fan out that encrypted material, but then restrict access on kind of an individual subscriber basis. That gets a lot more complicated. Ian?
Ian Sweat, Google. I am, I think maybe partially to echo the past comment, but some of these things you're talking about are certainly interesting, but they seem quite complex. Is the goal here to be better than HTTP and other comparable technologies, or is it to invent something new? Because this seems like something new, not just like we're going to be a lot more efficient than HTTP. I mean, in particular, in my experience, usually I find auth somehow goes back to like a P1 equivalent at the end of the day on a per playback basis. And maybe you can get by without that, but I think most use cases probably are going to end up with a design that somehow involves that. So obviously you want to be able to like validate that at R3. But are there really a lot of use cases that think they're not going to have I mean, there's more to a video playback than actually the video content, right? Like, for example, like there's the page or there's the app, there's a thing, right? There's auth there. Like there's something scaffolding surrounding it. And so I feel like every application I know of, you have to do some auth at that layer. And then it's just a matter of like, R3 needs to know how to validate that it's okay. I don't know. Am I being silly? I'm not sure if I'm asking a useful question or not, but like,
no,
this seems very broad and difficult to solve, and it seems interesting, but I wouldn't want to solve it.
Well, yeah. So I think this is relatively straightforward, and my preference is that wherever possible we do the simple thing, but there are requirements, and maybe Cullen can speak more to this.
I'm in queue. I'm going to jump just ahead in the queue slightly to try and answer Ian's question, a little bit of the previous one too, or whatever, which is a little bit like what is different here a little bit than classic HTTP. And in classic HTTP CDN, when we had R1 there, it doesn't ignore multiple relays. Just say there's only one relay. But R1 going back to the original publisher, quite often in HTTP, that's authenticated with a TLS domain of the original publisher, gives you who it is. And it's often mutual TLS the other direction, or some other way to know that that connection was valid coming into R1. And so you're totally right. There's an application laying on top of this that did all kinds of things, but you end up with this token binding problem of you need to bind some authorization token to this incoming request to know that it's correlated with the session that you've negotiated at your application level. And that is easy to do in the HTTP CDN case, but in the case where the original publisher is a client on the web somewhere that's not going to have a domain name or any of these things, I think that in the end we have to just have some token binding scheme there at some sort. Well, we have to fill something there that meets that gap. Yeah, and there's many ways to do it, but that's about what we need to grapple with at some level.
You can if you want. Okay. Yeah. Hi, Rowan May. So I just wanted to kind of verify, like, what Ted asked about proof of possession. When I hear proof of possession, I think of a client has a private key and they prove they own that, that they can demonstrate that they possess that private key.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not at all what you're doing, right? Or it is.
I think that some of the token schemes would do that, yes.
Okay, but they would be proving it for P, not for any real, and any relay by definition would not have possession of those keys.
I think it depends. I think that you could provide public keys to relays so that they could validate the signatures from subscribers potentially. Like that's
private keys.
The relays would not have the end subscribers' private keys. The relays may have their own private keys.
Okay.
Right. Like that's an option. Is that these upstream sessions could be separately hop by hop authenticated that way.
Okay. Thanks. And then also, it wasn't clear in slide 6, previous slide. So this is S2 is blocked because the subscriber is not associated. The subscriber's location is out of within 50 miles of LA.
Yeah.
So you have a VPN in and change your VPN settings in the middle. Do you still get to access the content?
It depends on the claims that are being validated, but this is like an example of a potential claim that you might have in a CAT token.
Okay.
That is a restriction on certain geographic regions, and then that's checked against some other signal that the relay has access to, like IP geolocation or some other signal.
I just found it like these were some of the questions that ran through my head when I admittedly quickly read through the draft, but I had a lot of requirements level questions. So thanks.
Hi, nice, Cisco. So this slide, this tripped me out because you said, well, the relay within this radius cannot have, this subscriber cannot have authentication. What if the relays are mobile? And I know that there is, the QUIC gives the underlying handover, and you also do not have any wall clock time, but what if the relays are mobile? Then would you reauthorize, when you check that it is mobile, then you reauthorize every time, or it is session level reauthorization?
If the relay itself is mobile and may not have access, sorry, I missed where the potential impact would be, because the sessions might be ephemeral.
Okay, so you're not going to reauthorize if the relays are moving around.
Yeah. So to validate these claims, I think for CAT tokens where that's been discussed, the discussion so far has indicated that there may be like revalidation that occurs throughout the track. The token may only be valid for some period of time, and then the client is responsible for re-authenticating before that expires so that they can continue to access the track.
Okay, so because say it's confusing because the MOQ draft says that it is the relay's responsibility to do that, but you're saying it's a subscriber's responsibility to keep track of reauthorizing, right?
In that scenario, it would be the subscriber's responsibility to reauthorize. The application would know what the timeout would be.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Okay, so these are kind of the different topologies, permutations that we've discussed so far. This is kind of what I think the protocol implications are. So again, as we have things written today, auth token is a hop by hop thing. Whether it's a setup option or whether it's a message parameter, that is hop by hop. Only properties are currently end to end. So if the original publisher does need to directly validate the end subscribers, it implies that there's some requirements here that we don't currently support, and we need to devise some method of figuring out what the right rules are for forwarding things upstream in that way. Whether that can be done at some higher layer, like a streaming format that says, okay, you have to do this. I don't know. I don't think that we can get through the relay. So we may have some transport requirements if we need the relays to reliably forward things upstream. Oh, we've got a queue.
Mike, I just want to provide a slightly different alter view on that, which is the reason we allow multiple auth tokens in the same message is because they were meant to be forwarded onto other things. That was the design property from the very beginning. So we have many other things that even though they are negotiated hop by hop, they are forwarded on. So, I mean, I think that this is just all part of the design that was never nailed down.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that there may be a different interpretation of that. So
totally buy that.
So I think that my interpretation is that we want multiple tokens because the same client may want to present that bundle of tokens to different entities that it is directly communicating with, right? So like,
yeah, but I mean, a given connection is only communicating with a single relay.
So here, if for S1 may reach R2, or depending on current load and whatever traffic shaping is happening, the CMS may direct them to R3 because that's the cheaper CDN today, right? And they want to be able to just present a token to whatever CDN they end up landing on, and it should be interpretable by either of them. I don't think that's the same thing as this model where you're presenting multiple tokens that you haven't in the draft. I don't think.
I agree. We need to figure all of this out is the only important point. Yeah. But I don't think this was a design decision that was really made.
That was made. Yeah. Okay. As written, I don't think that the spec supports that forwarding.
Alan Frindell. The other thing that's end to end are tracks, and I wonder if there's a design where if the original publisher is really looking for information from end subscribers, that it could use subscribe tracks in some clever way for that to happen. I don't know if that's better or worse. I haven't thought about the properties. So throw that in the bucket when you think about other things. That's one thing. To the discussion that was happening, this idea, we have definitely gone through this, like the auth is terminated at the first relay because it's hop by hop and you may be aggregating is absolutely something that, I mean, I figured it out when I implemented my first relay like 3.5 years ago. I'm like, oh, look, where this, like, only the first guy gets his auth checked. And like, well, what if, like, that doesn't make any sense. And how does this work? I mean, if we need to talk about it now, we can, but I don't think it was like, we put a pin in this. I had really thought that we all agreed that that was how it was going to work. And I'm a little bit wary about adding lots more complexity, but I'll wait till you guys come with like a little bit more concrete proposals before I weigh in. But yeah, all right, I guess that's all I'll say for now.
Suhas, it's nice that we are finally talking about auth, which has been pushed for a while, and hence today's implementations are taking a simple demo kind of application and terminating the auth at one relay. But real deployment does not fit in that model many times. And in particular use cases, even when we run WebEx, we leverage multiple CDNs. And in that case, the CDNs are also, a client would not talk to both the CDNs. It's the CDN to CDN policy that makes them talk. And in that case, your audience in the claim basically says the first hop that, if you're talking to CDN B, this is the token you should give to the other CDN. So what client does is that all it knows is that I have these 2 tokens, I need to give to my first hop, and that takes care of giving to the other hops. And because the entire CDN network would not be visible for a client as such, other than providing the tokens provided by the issuer to pass it on. Again, this multiple tokens is kind of a common practice in many places, and also it can be used, as you said, as a client can provide to two different relays. At the same time, it also has the implication that, based on the audience, it can be passed on. It's not an end-to-end as such. It's like one CDN to another CDN, or in some cases, it can be end-to-end to the original publisher as well. My point is that we're finally talking about these things. Let's kind of spend more time and figure out what we need to do. Thanks.
Chris?
Yeah, Chris Lemons. So you say the original publisher needs to validate in subscribers implies a requirement to relay auth. So typically, in to be clear, my way of thinking, which is not the only way of thinking about these things, the original publisher validates the in subscriber and then hands it a bearer token, because the publisher trusts the relay to faithfully relay the content. And if it doesn't, then it should be using a secure object. And maybe even not then. But the relay is authorized to relay the content, and the way it knows to whom it may relay is because those people present a bearer token that was authorized by the publisher. Now, I think there was a very good observation in that we're going to need some sort of a token binding in order to identify publishers that don't come with publicly trusted TLS certificates. I think that's an excellent observation. We're going to almost certainly need that. But that doesn't necessarily mean a requirement to relay authentication. Now, I can't speak for every possible kind of token, though, because there are a couple of different tokens that are suitable for different purposes. And I have opinions about the additional slides or elements on the page, but we'll wait until we get there.
I remembered one other thing I wanted to say, because you mentioned auth alias here, and I think that is probably not what. That should only be used to compress tokens on a single hop. That's all it's designed for. Okay. And I don't think you can use that for anything here unless I'm misunderstanding something grossly.
Yeah, so context here is not as a end-to-end reinterpretation of auth alias. It's so in the context where so for example here, I guess, or here. So if we are going to sample some subset of these clients, and we need a way to go upstream, and we say that there's a new. Sorry, I said it was not about like a new interpretation, and now I'm describing the way it would be used is still hop by hop. So it would be hop by hop between R1 and P1, because you have the subscribe already running. So if you need to do like authentication of additional tokens that you're somehow going to bind to like this shared aggregated track that is already authorized some other way, right? You need some way to like out of band, authenticate additional subscribers, right?
I understand what you're saying. I don't think you want to use anything to do with our token compression scheme at all to do that. I think you might want a message which is like, hey, S2 showed up and this is their credential. Do I let them in or not? Like that's a message that you might want to send. If that's what you want to do, that's okay.
You don't want
and that could be, if we keep compression, you can compress that token, although you'll probably never reuse it there. So I don't really understand why.
Okay, so you're just going to accumulate state in your token cache, and that's no good. Yeah, that's fair. I think that the reason that we wanted to reach for it is because it was like separate, like in an identifier that you can just attach to subscriptions and keep that separate from an ongoing subscription. But okay, so yeah, so there's because of aggregation, if we do need to do some kind of additional authentication that is threaded through the relay boundary, then you need some way to like do that in parallel to the aggregated subscription or whatever the aggregated action is. And we do need some way to spell request, challenge, response things. I think that's a spelling issue. That part's relatively straightforward. It's more about these topologies where you might need end-to-end properties, that is raising the biggest question right now. And we're looking for kind of a generic pattern that's usable across all token types. We think that the request challenge response pattern is fairly flexible and should be reusable. Potential ordering issues. So in draft 18, we have moved all our control messages onto their own streams, which means that we're not guaranteed ordering. So if we're going to do authentication and separately have MOQ actions, other control messages that are referencing that state, now we have ordering issues that we need to resolve that we didn't have before. I think those are all solvable. We can define how things need to block and what kind of timeouts they should use, etc. But I did want to call that out, that when we had the monolithic control stream, that part of it was simpler. Okay, so here's an example of spelling for the challenge response. You would have some subscribe to a track with an authorization token that would have some token type, and if it's null, it doesn't have what it needs to do the proof of possession yet because it hasn't received a challenge to respond to. Then whatever the upstream entity is would provide an auth challenge back, and then you would respond with some kind of auth response. And if that's valid, then you would get a subscribe OK, for example. Spelling questions are, do we want this to be a new auth challenge message that can be elicited by a subscribe? Do we want to have a separate auth message instead of doing the subscribe? And then we reference that in the subscribe. Those are, I think that's kind of what we're looking at here.
Mosinati, do you expect these new messages to be in the subscribe by die or on their own new streams?
That's one of the questions that I'm asking.
Oh, okay.
Is like, so if we instead say that we have like a new auth message, and you just say like auth, and that's the thing that carries this initial authorization token, and then you get back a challenge and response, and then you have some kind of identifier that you can then use in subscribe. That's one way of doing it, and then that happens on a separate stream, and then the subscribe stream can reference it. Another way of doing it is to keep closer to what we have right now, which is subscribe, which has an authorization token parameter, and then you get back either a specific type of request error that is a challenge, but then you can then send another message, this response, which gets, that's a lot of back and forth on the subscribe. So I don't know if we want to do that.
Alan Frindell, I dropped this in the chat, but it seems like you could also do it as a parameter. Like you send the subscribe OK in step 2 with the challenge in it, and then the subscriber sends a request update with the auth response, and then the last one's a request OK. It's just another spelling of the same thing, but that assumes that you all want to do it on the same stream. I can't think, what are the advantages of not doing it on the control stream?
So the fact is that a lot of applications, you're going to be subscribing to multiple tracks. And do you want to do that whole challenge response exchange on each message? We also still have authorization token as a setup option. So some of this could happen on a session-wide basis, but depending on the application, you might need more granularity than that. And if we spell this in such a way that it's necessarily attached to each subscribe, then there's just a lot of back and forth that we have to do.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And the request update trick does not apply to setup, but I see what you're doing. Okay.
Chris?
Yes. So if you go back a slide, I think I'm observing that probably not by accident, this is shaped almost precisely the way Depop nonce challenges are shaped. And so when we are looking at how we spell Depop on the wire for cat, that this makes complete sense. Whether we spell it as an auth challenge or as a as a setup okay or whatever we do on that one, you provide a nonce and say, hey, your authorization, your proof of possession isn't good enough. Please come back with this signed properly. And looking to the Depop specification for exactly how that works and making sure that we have analogs, I think will help people get their brains around it.
Cool. Thank you. So Cisco, +1 to what Chris said. Also, I like this design where we started this design with namespace, where you do subscribe namespace and subscribe namespace. By the time it ends, you can have multiple namespaces that comes, which is like a push of the namespaces that is coming in. This kind of follows that model as what it will support is that within a subscribe context between a request and an error or request and an okay, you have all the auth happening between that one. And it also provides a model where in privacy pass where if you want to re-evaluate your auth, a server can basically say, provide me new challenge. And those kind of things can be easily fit on this model. So this kind of, we proved this design works in subscribe namespace, and bringing something like this here makes total sense. Thanks.
So these are my proposals. This is like my take on trying to summarize what the working group or the design team has discussed so far. So if I'm misstating things, hopefully the other team members will forgive me. First question is, should we add a challenge response message? I think yes, it's just a question of exactly how to spell it. We got some good ideas on that, and then the input is helpful. If people have more thoughts, I think there's already an open issue. I should have included the issue number here, but it's referenced on an earlier slide. Should we add a way for relays to statistically validate upstream tokens for aggregation? Maybe. Like, this is awfully complex, as many others have noted. But what I've heard is that there's a requirement for that end-to-end validation. So I think that is going to require further exploration. Should we specify types of scopes that need to be supported? I think that as I'm interpreting this from our notes, I think that this was talking about multi-CDN sharing and being able to say in Privacy Pass and in CAT, both those drafts should have some kind of field for claims that are like a scope ID. And that scope ID should be for a particular provider. So like if you have a CAT token that says scope IDs, and then it's like, Cloudflare scope ID, 57, Fastly, Akamai scope IDs, whatever other numbers. They're going to be unique to the provider. And it would be great if you could just put those all in the token. And should we specify authorization on data plane and control plane? Yes. I think Cullen wrote that one. Maybe you can remind me exactly what
Yeah, I
we
can
meant by
remember.
that.
That's my question. What do you mean?
What does that mean? Okay. So let's say we, I think the point I was trying to make here is if we have something, the question came up earlier by Rowan of your IP address, you're said that your IP has to be within geoloc to 50 miles of Victoria or whatever it was. And your IP changes to something that changes that value. How often do we do it? So we're authorizing the data objects here. And I think that that's, we need to come down. And so I think, unfortunately, to meet any of the video distribution requirements or to make the CAT token useful, what you're authenticating is not well, you're not authenticating anything. What you're authorizing with this authorization token is actually the delivery of the data, not that the subscribe got a subscribe okay. So if whatever caused that, if whatever properties were checked to decide that the data, that this object was okay, if that changes on the next object, like it timed out, like the token is now expired at that point in time, you have to check that again. And so effectively the problem is we are authorizing the data objects to be delivered here, and that's what people need to that's what we're really getting at with this point here, which I think is a surprise to many people, right? They're like, oh my God, that's a huge performance question. Yes, it is. But when you go and look at what do you think this cat token means, I think you quickly come to the conclusion, or you start looking at the requirements, you realize, oh no, I do need to, I can't have a subscribe run for 10 years on a token that was valid for 5 minutes. That makes no sense. So that's really what this is about.
Chris?
I just maybe I would only just maybe change what that makes sense. The question here is not exactly like, do we need to have a way to say how often do things need to be revalidated? Yes, like very much.
Thank you. Chris?
Briefly, question 3, you were discussing scopes. The things you described were envisioned originally as audiences. I don't know that that's how people in here think about them, but we should contemplate.
Okay, audiences. Sounds good. That's it. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. That's a good start, Mike.
Or is it Ian, or both?
Which editor is going to talk today?
I don't even remember what I put in here. How many minutes did I have? 20? Okay, let's rock and roll. Okay, blocked issues. In case you did not know this, it's been discussed before, but like when we look at an issue and we're like, we have a question and we need it answered in order to make progress on it, we mark it with this blocked tag and we assign it to you and we mention you, please provide, and then, so there's 5 issues that are stuck against 3 different people looking for your input. So your choice is you go to the issue and you answer the question, remove the tag, or you close the issue and we move on. So please take note and do that. Okay. Management considerations. So MOQ definitely has management considerations and we should write them down. And there are 2 related issues that got filed. One is about how should clients get diagnostic data from relays, and another one is about creating well-defined metrics that people might want to use for management. And my question for this group is, where do we want to write them down, or how and who? So do we want to try to address that in this document, or do we want to have a separate applicability manageability document as some other groups have done for other work? In either case, we would need other volunteers, I think, to drive this work, because the MOQ authors and editors, as aforementioned, are already at maximum capacity. So it's like people who are passionate about the manageability and applicability, please stand up. Suhas, you are an author on too many drafts. Sit back down.
Clarification. It's a clarification question. When you say metrics, are you talking something other than MLog or something like MLog?
You'll have to ask the issue filer.
Okay.
I mean, I assumed it was like, if you want to, if you were going to write manageability considerations for MOQ, you might say something like, here are the things that you might want to monitor to find out if you're being DOSed or something. Like these are important metrics to look at. I'm not sure.
I said it in a somewhat more oblique way on the issue, but this is a great candidate for an extension because, I mean, sometimes you own your whole system basically, and like you want to manage it the way you want, and you have no interest whatsoever in a standard. Like,
when you say extension, do you mean a separate document, or
yes, yes, absolutely, like definitely a separate document, or maybe there's like data you need for one application and not for the other thing. I don't know.
You mean for metrics and metrics specific?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like it's important. I mean, but like, put as little as possible in MOQT.
In the chat, Altanai is volunteering to co-author the draft for diagnostic data from the relay.
So who is?
Altanai.
Okay. I mean, not a lot of people have weighed on this topic, but like, is it okay? I mean, and this came up briefly in the agenda bash, but is it okay? Can we start with, much like we did with DOS, can we create a repo for, this is the shell of applicability, manageability concerns, and we will iterate on it there. We will file issues on it there. The volunteers will all muster and track their work there. And if the powers that be say that has to be, or some subset of that has to be in mock transport, we will merge it in when that happens. But I would like to kind of clear this out of my deck, if that's okay. Does anyone object to that course of action? Okay, fantastic. We will do that. And please, if you're
so Altanai, you're volunteering to co-author. Are you willing to start the 0 in the repo?
Sure, yeah, I can do that. But I didn't understand the entire process that was described. Where am I supposed to start? I mean, I can start a draft, but
We can coordinate offline. We'll help you get started.
okay, thanks.
Okay, fantastic. We've got some time. Let's talk about timeouts a little bit. Okay, so there's several different issues that talk about timeouts, and I think, and I've seen the same. I think the quote here is representative of a view, which is that like anytime something times out, the client really needs to know that a timeout happened, and or either because there was like an error that said this thing timed out, or because it knew what the timeout was and it could look at its watch and be like, oh yeah, the relay said it was going to be 60 seconds. And lo and behold, the stream closed and it's been 60 seconds. I guess I'm trying to understand, like, is this a principle we should be working around? And is the solution space around that we just need to make sure that every operation that can possibly terminate in a timeout? And here I'm thinking of like, things like delivery timeout are explicitly negotiated, but there's so many other things. And there's another slide that you'll see where implementations are going to have timeouts, and they may even be changing based on load. And suddenly, yeah, normally my idle timeout is 60 seconds, but right now I'm under load and I'm going to close your connection after 5. But do we need to have negotiation? I don't know. Maybe I'm asking too vague a question here. Martin Duke's going to rescue me.
Yeah. Well, first of all, not client. I think you mean subscriber.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. So, I mean, aren't these always, I mean, don't timeouts either result in a reset, or in the case of fetch, like a missing object marker?
Is this slide helpful?
God.
This was a list of things I thought about that you might time out for when you're dealing with MOQ. You might be timed out.
Okay,
with,
I'm not going to go through that real time. All right, thanks.
Like you might be timed out waiting for a setup message, for a control message after a stream opened, for the end of a message after you saw the start of the message. I mean, there's a million different things. And I was trying to understand, like, okay, some of these have predictable outcomes, some of them do not. But I think that the higher level question is like, some of these things, for example, might result in just me unsubscribing from you because you didn't provide something to me in a timely way. And the other side may not ever know that that's why, because the other side might never know what my timeout was that I was waiting for. And is that something that we need to have explicit signaling around? Do we need to have 14 different timeouts that you advertise at setup so that the peer knows exactly what your internal timeouts are? Or is there a little bit of, yeah, sometimes things happen is okay. Cullen.
So, I mean, I think this is just a special case of the generalized error problem that we have, which is like, why did an error happen and what should I do to recover from it? And timeouts are a very special case of that, right? And we've seen other protocols like DAV is very difficult to do high quality clients against random servers because it doesn't specify enough of this stuff, right? And that's an HTTP example. And it's got a lot of problems. And I mean, I've worked a lot with that. And I don't want us to end up in that same case that we are there. And so the model would just do it like HTTP doesn't actually really work as soon as HTTP gets complicated even. So I think we need good errors. We need to understand these timeouts. Now, on the question of each one of these, like, do we need to negotiate them or do we need to specify them? I don't really know, but like all of these seem great examples of you should be able to understand which one of those things happened and what you should do about it. I think should be the underlying principle, right? And you're right, some of the ones that you can't negotiate things in setup that you're going to dynamically change on the fly, right? I agree with that. But you do need to understand that why something didn't happen and whether you should just try again or whether that would be the worst thing possible for the server right now if everybody tried again, right? Those are, you know, that, and just throwing it out there as it broke, give up is like, that doesn't really work for the type of applications we're trying to build here, right?
I mean, I hear a lot about what you say, but I also think that, you know, just this exercise of putting this slide together,
yeah,
and I'm sure it's not exhaustive, right? And I am trying to think of like, how am I going to, like, I don't want to keep having this discussion every time somebody says, well, what about, so I wanted to get like, what is our principle that we can use to be very clear?
I think we should go through the whole draft, and everywhere an error can happen, including a timeout, we should figure out how the client knows what happened. Or in some case, it might be a security thing. It might be like, no, the client should not know what happened. But we should think about it logically and be able to do that, right? And we should be able to communicate what that is, right?
Okay.
Right now we have way too many errors that all map to the same thing to understand.
I mean, okay, so there's a separate, that we have too many errors that are all protocol violation with sort of a
I think this is the same thing.
Yeah, this is different. This is more about, I'm trying to understand like that there's some operations for which like the result doesn't even have a way to say it. Like I said, like unsubscribe. I never tell you why I'm unsubscribing. I'm just unsubscribing from you. I don't want it anymore, but that could be because you didn't send me anything in the time that I expected you to.
But that's very important. Is it, do you unsubscribe because I just never did anything, or you unsubscribe because you're overloaded? Those are two very different situations that I, as a client, need to react to differently. And so I need to know that information. It's not just, sure, whatever.
So, in fact, unsubscribe is not even a message. It's a quick reset stream, which carries no,
as I have said, when we move to reset stream, we're starting to lose information granularity of explaining what the error was, and that was one of the issues I raised with it. So look, I guess I mean, whatever. Yes, I think we should have all these separate, but I don't think these are really, I'm not seeing these as too much different than the other error cases is what I'm saying.
Okay. I guess let me ask it like let me let other people talk. Ted.
Ted Hardy, you asked for a principle. And I think the base principle, which kind of falls out of what Cullen was saying and you were responding, is you need to know which layer will take action, right? So just like you had the .session thing to indicate that this never gets passed up to the application, this is entirely within the mechanics of MOQ itself, you need to know which layer has to take the action in response to an error, and in particular to a timeout error. The first thing I would do is classify these things to say how many of these are actually things that the application needs to know about, and therefore the base action that the lower layer needs to do is to pass it to the application that this has happened. How many of them are taking place lower than MOQ because they're quick level shit happened, like a knack, and how many of these are at the MOQ layer where it's all going to be done within MOQ itself, and never passed up to the application before MOQ has resolved it. And I think if you do that exercise of kind of, here are my buckets of things, you'll then kind of rapidly figure out whether it's tractable to tell the application what to do about it or not. Because there are going to be whole classes of things where you just tell the application what happened, and the application figures out whether it's going to do anything or something, and what that something is based on what type of application it is. But I think that as a principle might be a way that you start tackling this problem to get yourself at least past the point of where it's an undifferentiated mass of things and we don't know what to do.
Thanks.
Hi, Colin Perkins. I basically agree with everything Ted just said. Explicit is good. You should not only know who has to take the next action, but what are the set of possible next actions that could be taken. And I think we need to specify that for everything in the protocol. That the less that is left undefined, the better.
Okay. Thank you.
Ian Sweat. I think everything they said is good. I think there's two different things, which is knowing that a timeout occurred versus like I think something you originally asked, which is like, do we need to communicate all the timeouts on the wire? And I would say absolutely not. The only timeouts we should communicate on the wire are those for which not communicating them could cause an obvious disruption in application performance. Like I will unexpectedly kill your subscription because you didn't do a request update. So like, as much
expires is another one. Yeah.
Like basically like, anything where like the application will not perform well from a user visible perspective. If you do not communicate it, then we got to have something explicitly communicated, because otherwise like we're going to be sad. Otherwise don't. Like less is more.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think one specific example on here, which is 1720, which talks about fill timeout, which is the text currently says is like, well, the client says like, well, my fill timeout is a day. I'm willing to wait a day. for you to fill these things. And the relay is like, yeah, that's so cute. Like, I'm not going to keep your subscription open that long waiting for things. And so it's going to reduce it. And then the subscriber doesn't, like, I think that's the point here is like, well, how does the subscriber know that that happened? Or again, it could be dynamic. And so maybe the answer there, rather than trying to put all the timeouts in setup and try to broadcast everything, because we will inevitably miss something, is to try to make sure that it's clear, like you get a different status in the fetch response, for example, when it's unknown because of timeout or it's unknown because of something else. Maybe that's going to satisfy and like seem like fit more in the principle. Just go ahead, Colin.
I mean, I think for that type of design, I would have preferred more that when the initial request came up, it got an error right away that said, this number is too large for me. And that error included, here's my limit, here's my current limit for you on what that number would be if you wanted to try again, right? Like that would allow you to do good clients and good design. Not, I start to get some objects and then suddenly I get a timeout error. Right.
I do hear what you're saying, but I worry it's not really extensible, or it's going to become intractable rapidly as we like think about every possible case that somebody may have asked for something that was unacceptable. If that needs to happen, I prefer I will broadcast my limits and setup, and then you will know like what the limits were.
But I mean, I like all of these types of designs we're just talking about, you know, like hit my solve my problem of like the client knows what happened and why or whatever, right? And I agreed with what Ian said too. But I just think we need to go through these. And there's a bunch. I agree with you. There's probably more than you identified on your slide, but I don't think there's hundreds. I think there's, you know, a numerable number, and we need to go through. And we've always identified this as one of the big chunks of work we needed to go do on the draft was errors. Like my last review of it certainly didn't cover errors. I have a lot of comments.
I mean, unfortunately, the PR has gone stale already, but Suhas did take a whack at like redoing the granulated error codes. We definitely need to do that. We just need to do it at a time when the draft's a little bit more quiescent so that we can get it done. I am going to roll, while we're here, I do want to get some on this question. So the current text and security section basically says like, you should use timeouts, because if you don't use timeouts, you might have problems with like people trying to send you stuff and not sending you that in a reasonable time, and you set your own timeouts. And there's, you know, but how much guidance do we give? Are we trying to enumerate all the scenarios? I think Colin just said, yes, try to enumerate them all. I do worry that if we try to do that and we miss some, people will be lulled into a false sense of they don't need to think about anything we didn't think about for them, rather than giving them a class of problems to think about. And the other question is like, do we want the document to say specific recommended numbers or ranges for particular values of these timeouts? And I am inclined to say no. Maybe orders of magnitude at most, but like recommending specific values doesn't seem right to me. Does anybody want to jump in? Mo?
Mozanetti, I think it's less important to specify the small numbers all over the spec. I think what's more important is to identify the cases where it's unbounded, the cases where the time is unbounded and the implementation can't really set a useful timer because this really is unbounded. So it's your own application decision of what the time bound should be. I think those are the cases that need to be identified, because those are the ones where the application really has to make a decision about, okay, this is going to be a long operation. It could be unbounded. I need to decide my own timeout. That's what I think is more important.
All right, thanks.
I think Martin Duke, Google. I think we've, and as an individual, obviously, I think we have very unique, specific requirements around object delivery that are captured by delivery timeout and fill timeout. And delivery timeout is in fact negotiated today. I don't know if fill timeout is, but it could be quite easily. Do we have a huge problem with this in HGP? Where I mean, they're hanging gets. They're, you know, you get half a request, and do we have to reinvent the wheel here, or can we just survive with just like the publisher just erroring out when it's a stupid delay?
I mean, I'm inclined toward less is more, and like that I think resonates a bit with Mo, which is what Mo's statement was, which is like find the places where it's really like instead of what we have here, which is a little bit like, go find the timeouts in here and pick the important ones, and instead we can say like, these are some that are likely to be big resource problems for you if you don't put some sort of reasonable bound on it. Like think about it in advance, but I don't know. I think the HTTP ecosystem like works. Sometimes things time out. People debug it. That's why we have jobs.
So it's our employment program.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, this does not seem like a unique MOQ. Like these generic request timeouts do not seem like something that's unique to MOQ. The delivery and fill timeouts are unique to the MOQ use case, and so I'm just really reluctant to take on these problems that seem to exist where people seem to be fine with them in other contexts.
Okay.
I just want to give an example of one that didn't go well where we went that approach. And that is the how long a NAT waits before it times out your connection. That went very, very poorly for us right? So what's different than HTTP here is this is a magnification fan out type intermediary designed in by default type protocol. It might have some things that are a little bit different than HTTP, which basically client server.
Okay, I think the lesson there, which is valuable, is like there may be specific ones we need to say more about, and rather than
100% agree.
Okay.
One more aspect is we should specify what is different for a relay versus a subscriber or original publisher. Because I think there's plenty of cases where the relays may need to have a lot more, resilience, and they're serving 1 million people. They're not going to time out things, quickly.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's all we're going to have time for today. Yep. But thank you for all for your time.
All right, that concludes this session. Thanks to all the presenters. Good job staying on time, and we will see you on Thursday.
Okay, now time it works. I submitted that we had this issue.
All right, I think I'm good on. Let me give you this charger back before I forget. I'm not done. Yeah.